Jesse Homestead, how the heck are you? Um, yeah, had to redo the intro on this one because this one's getting up a little late. Um, had thunderstorms roll through here. I'm on HughesNet, and poof, that was it, and so I couldn't upload it. So I'm going to upload it tonight at 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I love HughesNet. God love them. Anyway, so let me get this thing started, and it's kind of important information. We're going to be dealing with some climate change. Yeah, I love that. And Agenda 21. Yeah. But it's pretty important information, and I wanted to share it with you. So I'll talk to you in a minute. So, anyway, interesting information that I was looking through this week, and I found it to be pretty fascinating. There is, everybody's heard, and I'm sure if you believe in global warming, okay, and the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, you may be interested in this. See, because you're being told out of the UN that science is settled. All those scientists that look at this agree there's going to be climate change. It's a partial truth. Okay? Partially true. There are really about three camps. There's the good old IPCC. They're of the opinion that global warming is caused by CO gases in the atmosphere put there by you little dickens. And they need to control you through their Agenda 21 to make sure it stops and we don't wipe out the planet. First off, if you look at their models, they're talking about in its worst case scenario, sea levels would start rising at about a half an inch a year. Half an inch a year. Okay? And somehow that's going to wipe out millions of people in places like New York and LA and Florida. If you're standing on the beach in Florida and sea levels start rising at a rate of a half an inch a year, let me tell you how to escape that. Take a step back. You're good for about 10 more years. Okay. Has Florida ever been flooded? Has New York ever been underwater? In the history of this planet? Yes, it has, folks. You betcha. Okay? Think about it. And if you go out and do the research, you'll see that, yeah. In past ages, you bet. Yeah. And there's also been times that even more land was out of the water during ice ages. All right, Florida could have been like the size of Texas, but but they don't want to talk to you about that. This is serious stuff there. That carbon, all right. Well, that's the smallest group of scientists out there. There's a lot of people studying it, okay, because they can get funding, and that's how these scientists make their living. All right, saying, yeah, we're checking into global warming. And they are for sure not going to say anything to the contrary like Dr. Soon did, and they cut off your funding because of it. Yeah, because he started coming up and going, well, yeah, there could be, climate's going to change, and I think I found out why, and had nothing to do with mankind. So, there went his funding. He got additional funding. The oil company stepped up and said, we like the way you think, son, let us fund you. And he took this funding, but in his defense, he told them, however the chips may fall, that's the way they're going to fall. But yeah, the UN and the government cut off his funding when they found out he did not agree with man-made global warming. But anyway, back to the three camps. You have this IPCC out of the UN, who, like I said, your fault, that's it, we need to control you. Then you have the group who are going, we've looked at the research, we've looked at the Russians' research and the Chinese research, and we seem to think that it is the sun that is causing this issue. And yeah, it's probably going to warm the planet. That's that group. But they're looking at the sun, and they're seeing a lot of the same things that the third group is seeing. Okay? Now, each of these groups put out their models of how the weather is, and this has been going on since the 60s, folks. All right? So we're not talking about a short-term research here. This has been going on since the 60s. You know, the hippies, reduced carbon. Yeah, that was the start of all this, because they bought into it. All right? So, the third group, that's where this Dr. Casey, he's a astrophysicist, I believe, out of NASA, worked on all the lunar stuff. And he also did some joint research with Dr. Soon and with this, with the Russians, you know, and looking at their stuff. And he's went way back in history and started even looking at working with geologists to say, what's the history of the planet? What reactions have we seen? And he put out his model. So you have the global warming caused by the sun group, which are probably twice as many scientists as the UN's group. And they're saying global warming is possible due to solar activity. And they put out their charts, what they call their weather models, so that they could track and see if they're on track with this, if their theory is correct. Then you have the IPCC, and they gave us the old hockey stick, which they're still standing by, even though since it's never, ever, ever been correct. Ever. Okay? That'd be like having a weatherman telling you every day it's going to be 90 degrees and rain, and it never is. For decades. After decade. After decade. You would begin to think this guy's pretty much full of beans. But for some reason, we've got a large percentage of these folks in this country running around going, but the UN says, yeah, they've had a chart out there since the 70s. And it doesn't add up. It's been inaccurate all the way through. At some point, you got to call BS. All right? Then you have this Dr. Casey and the Dr. Soon. And here again, they're looking at solar activity and what effects it has on geology. And it's like, wow. After reading some of their stuff, it's like, this makes sense. Okay? Stars, they pulse. They get bigger, they get smaller, they back and forth and back and forth. That's what they do. Okay, they're big balls of fire. So, our sun, and you've probably heard this on the news, is going through what I think he called a de minimis period. Okay? A lot of solar spots. I've heard that one on the news talking about that. A lot of solar flares. We talked about that on the news. And also a lot of coronal ejections. Heard that on the news. Here's what they're not talking about. The sun, when it starts that, is usually because the surface is cooling. And the sun, by its nature, here we go, nature, it will finally, through its gravity, contract back quickly. Just kind of pull that gas back in. Well, folks, that causes some big time gravity changes on little old Mother Earth here. And what they have found is that when it does that, we seem to have volcanoes go off. They start popping off big volcanoes. Guess what volcanoes do? They put a lot of ash in the atmosphere, especially a big one. Back in the 1800s, the one that went off back there that caused a mini ice age was probably, I think they said, 100 times bigger than Mount St. Helens. That was a big boom. Okay? And that, when the sun expands back out and gets back to normal, after its little de minimis period, then, yeah, it can't get any heat to the planet. We go into mini ice ages, sometimes full-blown ice ages, depending on how many volcanoes pop off. So this man started putting his models together based on, if this happens again, based on what happened in the 1800s, which was a mini ice age. But something to think about, it also is the one who they said probably set off the New Madrid fault. We have Yellowstone, who there, if you'll go out and do some research on that puppy has got them all concerned. Geologists are going, whoa, this is not good. Okay? What if that one decides to blow? All the geologists and weather people say the same thing. Welcome to the new ice age. It's coming. Right then and there. It will block out the sun. Right? What he's saying is the sun is going through a solar cycle. Russians say the same thing. That's what they came up with. So they did their models. So you have the global warming caused by the sun models. You have the UN's models, which we all know where those landed. Should have landed in a trash can probably 20 years ago, but some reason they're hanging on to them. And then we have his. And his is decades old also. His is track true, folks. Yeah, see, since, contrary to what the global warming people want to tell you, since 2013 there's been no warming. His model shows that. But at some point we flatten out. Because the sun's in a period of getting ready to do a de minimis act. Alright? And when he talked about the deaths from it, really there isn't any catastrophic thing for human beings. I mean, people need to, as the weather turns colder and they start seeing, I can't live here anymore, go south. But the biggest thing is food shortages and starvation. Because you're not going to grow a crop up there. Seasons turn too short during an ice age. We went through this in the Middle Ages. We went through a mild case of it in the 1800s. Looks like we're headed to one again. So when they were talking in the 60s of a possible ice age, they were probably closer to the truth than they knew. And something to start really taking a hard look at. He wrote a book called Dark Winter. Might be a good read for you. It explains out his theory and so forth. But the fact that his models are holding together. Anybody that does scientific research of any kind can tell you when a model tracks true, you can bet that theory is built on some pretty solid ground. And it's more than likely a strong possibility. And we're primed for it. You find geologists talking about the New Madrid fault is ready to go. Yellowstone is got them really concerned. And it has a history. I mean, that thing has erupted 6-7 times. They found the calderas where it moves each time it goes off. There's other volcanoes in the area that, in the world that are major volcanoes that could be very active. Now, could New York get flooded by that? Yeah, they say they got one that if it blows, half the island's going to fall into the sea and we're going to have a big tidal wave hit the east coast. But it's not going to be caused by the polar caps melting. The polar bears will be just, okay, they'll be on holiday, they'll enjoy themselves. So that's something you folks need to start looking at. I do know that the IPCC's program falls right into Agenda 21, which is nothing more than to blame you and to control you. And thus ends society as we know it. And that's bunk. And if you'll do the research on it, you'll find out it's bunk. They have been talking nonsense for decades. Decades. All right? Al Gore's little inconvenient truth. Yeah, he made enough money off of that sucker to go buy himself some beachfront property in California. Yeah, and that's, he believed what he was telling you. He's right. Yeah. And he didn't want to tell you that he was involved at that time setting up the carbon exchange market in Chicago. And if him and President Obama would have got their carbon tax put through, oh, I'll tell you what, at the end of the world, he'd been a very rich man. Okay? It's all about money and control and power. But here's some things that came out of this research that concerns me. One of the things about this sudden pull-in is it puts out an EMP wave. In the 1800s, it took out the telegraph system. Yeah. Okay? If we got hit with something like that again, it'd take out your power grids, your cars, your computers, your cell phones, anything electronic, down, gone. Okay? Even if you got solar power, if they're not properly, those batteries aren't properly protected and your converters are not properly protected, you're going to lose your solar power too. There's not going to be a lot of parts laying around for you to pick up. Okay? Because if they weren't in Faraday cages, they're gone. So that could be a catastrophe. Then the fact what they were talking about in the 1800s, now losing the telegraph was not that big of a deal to them back then. Okay? They cooked with wood. They heated their homes with wood. Okay? You're using a furnace or a heat pump or something of that nature. Lose that power grid, you lost your heat. You got an ice age coming at you. See what I'm saying? We're not set up for it. People have problems evacuating. No transportation. Walmart's not going to be open. Okay? Their trucks aren't going to be rolling. Grocery stores are going to empty out within a matter of days. And he was telling people that the most deaths in the 1800s was caused by starving people killing other people for their food. They'd kill you over a loaf of bread. They were starving. Bad one. Like if something like a Yellowstone caldera goes off and puts us into a serious ice age, half of this country would be covered in ice. I mean, New York wouldn't have to worry about being flooded. It's going to get scraped off into the bay of it. So you guys as preppers and so forth think about the stuff hitting the fan and a world without law and all these different scenarios. This has the potential of creating all those, all of the above. Something to think about. Totally natural. Planet has done it time and time and time and time again. It's just nature. Okay? Nothing sinister, just nature. The UN's trying to make it something sinister with their Agenda 21. Okay? Tell them to set up all their FEMA camps up north. That way when it goes, you ain't gonna really be put on ice. be advised. Don't want this to get too long. Do read the man's book. It's kind of interesting, called Dark Winter. His name is John Casey. He's, I believe it was an astrophysicist for NASA, but what research I've done on the fellow, UN doesn't like him. You know, they don't like anybody. They don't like him. They don't like Dr. Soon. They're going to scream that it was something put out by the oil companies. Well, you know, guys, let me tell you something. Understand that where our government and where the UN's at with it, if you try to get funding to do research, and that's how these guys survive, that's how they live, that's how they make their living. All right? They have to have somebody fund their research. All right? And you ain't going to get the UN or our government to fund research to prove that they're trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. They're not going to fund it. Oil companies, coal companies that know better, now they'll go, yeah, we'll fund you. And we'll accept your results no matter how they fall. So I don't hold that against them. And the fact that their models are tracking true tells me that I think they're on the right track. Their theory seems to be solid. And a lot of people are even beginning to step from the global warming caused by the sun side, looking at the research and beginning to step over to his side. Of course, the IPCC, they're never going to go anywhere because they have another agenda other than the truth. All right? And if you read that agenda, number 21, and all the little councils they have with it that they've been doing, you'll see that has nothing to do with actual destruction of planet Earth. When you look at the facts that geologists and so forth have shown, where in our past, okay, our CO levels have been much, much, much higher. Okay, was the climate a little warmer? Yeah, probably. Is it catastrophic? No. Has the seas rose and fall? Yes. During an ice age, they really go down. Matter of fact, there were civilizations that built cities on that dry land because of an ice age, only to get the shock of their lives when the ice age ended and the sea levels came back and their city was underwater. But you know what tickles me is the fact that at the rate that the UN says the sea levels are going to rise, and Al Gore said the sea levels are going to rise, yeah, you have time to move inland, get a job, call the movers, get you out of New York, get you out of these low-lying areas. You've got time, honestly. It's just barely creeping up a little each year. And if you're so stupid to be sitting in your Manhattan apartment watching CNN as the water begins to creep up your chest, and you're still sitting there waiting, good. I'm sorry, we need to get you out of the gene pool, okay? Because you're stupid, all right? We don't want you passing those genes along to anybody. And we would just as soon get you out of the civilization, okay? Because you're just too stupid to keep at it. Seriously, a half inch a year? And that's going to take lives? Really? You know? I guess down here we got a little more horse sense. If the water starts to rise, we step back. Okay? There's 3 camps, and yeah, most scientists agree there's going to be climate change. Okay, just exactly which one, it looks like we could be headed toward an ice age. Now, I also said this could be 10 years down the road, it could be 15 years down the road, it could be 50 years down the road. He doesn't think it'll go much farther than that. But according to his models, we could see this within 5 to 10 years. Prepare. Prepare. Prepare to protect yourselves. Prepare to be able to feed your family. And get out of New York City. You know, that's going to have a big glacier come down and just take you out. You'd be sitting there, well, you're not going to be watching CNN either because there'll be TV. And I wouldn't want to live in New York City with no power, not for 30 seconds. Your biggest danger there is not going to be climate. It's not going to be the amount of food. It's going to be the animals crawling the streets. And I'm talking about two-legged ones. Okay. Y'all take care. Get out and do some research. Take a look at this stuff. Take a hard look at Agenda 21 and understand what it's really all about. They don't really believe in global warming themselves. Okay? They really don't. Think about this one for 30 seconds. President Obama wasn't putting executive orders in place for the eventuality of global warming, sea levels rising, things of this nature. He was putting executive orders in place over food crisis, food shortages, and what powers the federal government could utilize during a food crisis. Global warming will not cause a food crisis. And I say it sure could. All right? Think on that one a bit. Have a good day. We'll talk to you later.